Alright, so working on the fuel pump on this 85 Chevy. I've got the old one off, just two 7/16 bolts. Got them off, and there's one of them right there. And I was going to show y'all, of course got the lines off, and this isn't a how-to video, but I will do some quick tips, I guess. There's a rod that runs off the camshaft. It's a long, solid rod that runs down, kind of diagonal from the camshaft down to the fuel pump, and it works that plunger on the fuel pump. That arm that sticks out of the fuel pump goes up against that rod. That rod, the cam, pushes that rod up and down, and it pumps the fuel pump. So when you take the fuel pump off, that rod, it drops down. So what I did, I used needle nose pliers to pick it back up, held it there, then got the needle nose pliers under the rod and kind of in there to where they were just like that. So they were sitting, the rod was sitting on top of this, and so they're just sitting there in that hole for the fuel pump, holding the rod up without me having to hold it. Once I did that, I got underneath, and I took one of the fuel pump bolts. So, let's see, where are we looking? Okay, so I'm going to shine the light. See that bolt, that bottom bolt? That's that bottom bolt and that top bolt. That's the bracket for the smog pump. If you don't have a smog pump, there may not be a bolt in that bottom one, but there should be a bolt in the top one. The one my light is shining on right there. So that bolt goes all the way through, or the hole for the bolt goes all the way through to that fuel pump rod. So what you want to do is take one of your fuel pump bolts, take the original bolt out, and the original bolt will be fairly short. And then take one of your fuel pump bolts and thread in, or one about the same length as the fuel pump bolt, and thread it into that hole and tighten it down until it just starts to snug. And that it bottoms out against that fuel pump rod, and that'll hold that rod up while you put the fuel pump in place. So I'm going to go ahead and get the fuel pump started in, and I can get the other bolt in. Once I get it kind of pulled up with the one bolt, then I can take this bolt back out, which will let the rod drop against that plunger, that arm that does the plunger on the fuel pump. So that's how you hold the rod up. Kind of hard to get in here, but it's just about impossible to hold the rod up any other way. So that being said, it's back topside to clean up the gasket area. As you can see, show y'all that rod. See, it's being held up. It's not dropping down. So let me clean up this gasket space, this gasket spot. Now I'm going to get the fuel pump in there. Make sure you get that plunger rod under that shaft right there. So I'm going to get that done and start bolting up the fuel pump. So fuel pump is on. Gets two bolts in it. Haven't put the fuel lines on yet. I'll probably leave the one off that goes to the carburetor, put a bucket under the truck and crank it over a little bit and get some of that nasty gas out of the line before I send it up to the carburetor. Pulled the rotten battery tray out. There it is. The only bolt left. These two were rusted off of it, and I've got a good inner fender and battery tray for it. For now, I'm going to put this battery tray's got a rusted off bottom in it, and that'll be good enough for now. because if I put a good one in it, there's nothing to attach it to. That's all rotted out. So let's get that bolted in, and then I'll hook the fuel lines up, and we'll crank it over. Actually, I'll change the oil and get that gas oil out, and then we'll crank it over. And cranking it over to pump up some of that nasty fuel out will also kind of give the engine some oil.